So Barriers is the first track on the album, and it's an interesting song, that, in the kind of genesis of the record, because it kind of, we wrote it at quite a kind of bleak time when we were kind of feeling like the record might not quite come together, and as soon as we wrote it, it sort of made sense of everything, and almost like felt like we had suddenly had a record rather than just a few bits of songs, sort of thing. So it was quite a key track in a way, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think we're all kind of weirdly fond of it. It's kind of like a favourite song, you know what I mean? It's one of the reasons why we kind of gave it away before the album and stuff like that. It's strange because it's not, I don't think, typical of the record. You know, it reminds me a lot of kind of Blondie or someone like that. One of those bands I kind of grew up listening to that are kind of half alternative and half pop. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's, I don't know, it's a real favourite of mine.
Yeah, I like it. God, what can you say about Snowblind? We wrote it quite early on, Snowblind. It was one of the early kind of like ones that just suddenly, it was me and Richard wrote it, and it was one of kind of classic sort of Richard guitar track that I just sort of immediately thought should have this sort of huge yelping chorus, and it just sort of worked.
For me, it's all about the riff. It's kind of built around the riff, the verse riff. In fact, I've argued many times that you should just hear it more and more times, all the way through that track. Everyone else is kind of like, you need to get to the chorus, and I'm the one going, what if we just have the riff going another 6 or 7 times?
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know, it's a big riff that kind of propulses the song along.
Is propulses the word?
It is now.
And it starts and ends with You is the next song, which is the first proper single from the album. And it's probably, I wouldn't say it's the poppiest thing on the album. It's definitely up there though, isn't it?
It's just one of those songs that I don't think we've written since kind of like New Generation, where it's just catchy bit after catchy bit after catchy bit. Yeah. You know what I mean? There's lots of songs where the whole idea is that the verse is this kind of little dark thing so that the chorus can come springing out. This one is just, it's kind of relentlessly tuneful.
There's a few songs on the album that do the same thing. It's not just a verse chorus song, it's a kind of like verse bridge chorus post bridge. Verse bridge chorus post chorus song.
This is basically what it's like in the studio. It's basically hours of someone going, right, the post bridge, you mean the middle 8? No, that's the chorus re-intro.
Yeah. Basically, there's lots of parts of the song rather than just 2 parts. With most pop songs, you can get away with 2 parts: a great verse and a great chorus. And this has got 4 bits.
It's got 4 bits, and they're all good. Yeah, Sabotage is kind of again, that's a really early one when the record was sounding quite.
It was actually the first song that made it on the album.
Yeah.
That we wrote, wasn't it? And it makes any sense. It's the earliest, sort of, the oldest song that made it on the album.
And it's kind of from when the record was sounding quite icy, isn't it? At that point, the record sounded, or the tracks that we had were sounding quite dark and quite icy and quite.
It was quite sort of post-punky, wasn't it?
Distant, yeah. And a lot of the things from them, I think we scrapped because they were a bit static and a bit kind of unsuady. But this one, I don't know, it's just got that chorus that kind of you can't get away from. I think we always knew we were going to keep it just because it's just got that.
I think it's quite uplifting as well. We played a whole load of songs in Russia, and this was the one that kind of went down the best. And playing it was just really quite an euphoric experience. It's funny when you play new songs to people for the first time, because you find things out about them regardless of sort of like hearing back the next day what they thought of them. Actually, the physical process of actually playing a song to an audience you find out so much about it, and we found out a lot about that song.
Because that was exactly one of the ones I thought, oh, this isn't going to really work live because it's quite stately, and lots of the stuff we were playing in Russia was, you know, it was fairly full on, but there was just something about it. It sounded right from the start.
For the Strangers, I think For the Strangers is one of the most kind of traditionally Suede sounding tracks on the album. It kind of sounds like almost it could definitely be something off the first couple of albums, but in quite a good way. I think it sounds quite timeless. It's probably the riff, the guitar riff is my favourite piece of guitar. My favourite guitar part on the record. It's a beautiful riff. It's just so. It was kind of inspired by Public Image Limited song called Rise, which has got this sort of cyclical kind of like guitar part, and we were sort of trying to not rip that off, but kind of we were quite inspired by it. Me and Richard sitting there kind of like, let's do something with this kind of feel. It's kind of like looped cyclical feel. And he came up with that riff, and I was like, yes, that's brilliant, let's do something like that. And I kind of wrote something which was kind of quite meandering over top of it, because it was quite rigid and circular. I thought it should have something that kind of like moved around quite a lot. And so the song For the Strangers came out, and
it sounds as unlike Public Image Limited
as
I can imagine.
But that's great, isn't it? That,
totally.
It's sort of, you know, you kind of, you have a starting point.
It's not where you
move so far away.
Exactly. Yeah.
You move so far away from that starting point that it doesn't really matter what the starting point was in the first place.
That was the one that kind of, when we recorded it almost something clicked into place. I think for me, of kind of. Oh, this is what a Suede record sounds like. I think it's the most Suede thing on the record.
Yeah,
it's one of those things that if you were to hear 2 seconds of it, you go, oh, it's them again. You know, but it kind of, after that, it kind of everything that came after it felt like a Suede track. You know what I mean? I don't know. It just, your hands start moving in a certain way playing that, and then the rest of it kind of follows from that. Hit Me was it was quite a late one. In fact,
it was. Yes.
Is it the latest thing? That's the final thing that we wrote.
Yeah, it could well be, wasn't it? It used to be called Victim.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
It used to be called Victim. Exactly the same sort of song, but with the different words. And then
it's weird. It's a strange one. This because it's very conventional. I think Suede sounding verse. But the chorus just, I can remember hearing the chorus for the first time and it just taking off in a way that nothing we'd written had really taken off.
Yeah.
It's right at the edge of your range.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, and I think that's a point that Ed was always trying to get to with these tracks, was to get that kind of slightly hysterical, slightly kind of like, you know, are you going to make it, or is it going to fall down?
No, he was definitely trying to make me less comfortable with my range as a singer, because I think, you know, what happened was, you know, very early on with Suede, I wasn't as kind of competent a singer, and I used to sort of like write slightly out of my, I didn't quite know what I was doing, I used to write slightly out of my range, and you had all these sort of songs like kind of So Young and Stay Together and stuff like that, that were, the voice is just a little bit out of control, and as you get older, you learn how to do it better, and I think Ed wanted to kind of me to sort of almost become more naive again, and to sort of like relearn about, almost not relearn, and kind of like unlearn what you did. And you know, with the first couple of songs we wrote for this album that didn't make it onto the record, I think he, you know, one of his main critical points was that the vocals just sounded too comfortable.
Yeah. No, that one definitely is kind of, again, that sounds to me like something that could have been on like the first couple of records.
Yeah.
It's got that kind of slightly grinding kind of Panic in Detroit riff, you know, it's I don't know, it's just it's very immediate and straightforward, that.
I think it sounds like the most like something off of Coming Up actually hit me. It's got that kind of sort of fizzy, sort of poppy thing going on. I think especially the guitar part. Great guitar part in the chorus.
Sometimes I feel I float away. I think it's my favourite thing on the record, actually. I think it might be my favourite track. and one of the things I really like about it is we kind of wrote it and then moved on to loads of other stuff, and then we just recorded it. And unlike lots of stuff on the record, which we've really worked on, kind of changed stuff and argued about what went where and how to build it, we just kind of recorded it as it was written. And there's bits at the end that were kind of almost like placeholders, and we were like, oh, we'll put something in there eventually, and then it sounded really good as we recorded it. So for me it's a really natural Suede song. There's nothing forced about it, even though it doesn't really sound like anything we've done before. It was just, I don't know, there's something very straightforwardly right about it. And it's also the track that Andy Wallace, who mixed it, I think it's the track that he did an amazing job on.
Yeah, it's a great mix.
The breakdown after the first chorus, where it just kind of spills away into this cavern.
Yeah, it's great.
It's just great. Fantastic on headphones, fantastic not on headphones.
Yeah, it's one of my favourite mixes.
It's a good one.
What Are You Not Telling Me? I think it was. I think if we'd have written this sort of earlier on, actually, well, we didn't write it earlier on in the writing process, because I don't think we would have been looking for a song like that early on. But once we'd kind of accumulated a whole load of quite sort of dense guitar, pop rock songs, I think we wanted something with a different texture to take the record somewhere else. In the same, there's lots of sort of Suede albums that we have sort of little different textures meandering into a different feel, especially on things like Dogman Star and stuff. I think that was kind of like almost like the intention here, that it was almost like fulfilled the role of something like Black or Blue or something like that.
In my mind, I know it won't be this way. This would be where the second side started. Being a vinyl man at heart, it's almost like
the pretty short second side.
I know, but just in terms of moods, it's or something like something like the second side of The Hounds of Love.
Yeah,
I mean, there's something about the way the first 6 tracks are pretty kind of brutally poppy in a way. You know what I mean? They're kind of they just get this stuff done, and then the whole record kind of breathes out for 4 tracks. I love this. Actually, might be my second favourite track on the album. It just has this kind of space to it and air to it that I love, and it's one of those songs that just niggles away at you every time you hear it. It's good.
I think it fulfills a good role in the album. It's we always wanted to make albums rather than just some songs that are put together and called an album.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's possibly an art that's in danger, the creation of an album. And I've always sort of thought that it's one of the ultimate art forms and should be preserved. And I've always kind of wanted to try and make albums, and the journey of the record, and it has a very important role in the journey of this record.
It's true, you wouldn't make a track like that unless it was going to be surrounded by a whole load of other stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You couldn't put the weight of a single on it.
No. Always is quite a...
Always was probably the most work, wasn't it?
We had to redo all that end section, didn't we?
Of any track, in that we wrote it almost as a jam.
Yeah.
And it came about really naturally, but it just kind of went on and on and on, which was quite nice. It kind of worked as this kind of, I don't know, sprawling, obsessional thing.
Yeah.
The kind of lyric fitted with this. Yeah. And then...
relentless kind of...
Exactly, yeah. And then we just kind of... it had to go somewhere. And so we tried a couple of middle eights, didn't we? And a couple of end sections, and then re-recorded it. And I don't think you can tell. It sounds very natural now when I listen back to it. It sounds like it's always been that way. But that was the one that that took the most work?
It needed to sound dramatic and twisted. It couldn't just be too sort of straight sounding. It needed to have a kind of like, yeah, I think because the lyrics are sort of almost about when obsession turns into something, I don't know, almost like stalkerish sort of thing. That's the idea of the lyrical idea of the song.
It's
the music needed to have that kind of intensity to work.
It kind of reminds me in a way of, you know, that R.E.M. track, the one I love. And there's that thing that people always say, that it's kind of like people say, oh, it's our song, you know what I mean, because of the title.
Yeah.
But you listen to the lyrics and it's incredibly dark, and you wouldn't want to be the person the song was about.
Yeah.
And I always think this about this, because it's kind of like you've got that chorus, and you know it sounds like a promise, but it's really a threat.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I like that double-edged thing to it.
Yeah. Yeah, which leads us on to the last song on the album, which is Fault Lines. This is, definitely one of my favourite tracks on the album, if not my favourite. It's just, I don't know, it's just, I think the textures, musical textures are really lovely. I like the melody and the song, how it works and how it lifts and the sections it goes through. And I like the sentiment as well. It's supposed to be a kind of almost a song about rebirth, about the kind of the kind of like waking up the next day after the sort of after the traumas that you faced, and sort of looking at the day as a new day. And I think it's a nice song to end the album with.